The late evening air in Red Creek had the kind of stillness that felt heavy, almost staged. The sun had dipped below the tree line, leaving behind streaks of crimson and violet, and the only sound on the back road was the rhythmic hum of Maya Ellis's tires rolling over cracked asphalt. She drove carefully, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near her medical bag on the passenger seat. As a VA hospice nurse, she was used to long drives at odd hours, delivering comfort to veterans in their final days. It was quiet work, but meaningful, the kind of calling that gave her strength even when the town itself felt unfriendly, unwelcoming. But tonight, the quiet wasn't peace. It was the silence before a storm. The first motorcycle roared up behind her like a predator catching scent of prey, then another, then several more. The vibration of engines surrounded her car until she realized she had been boxed in. Her pulse quickened. She had heard rumors of the Red Creek Reapers, a biker gang that thrived on intimidation. People whispered about their cruelty in the same way folks talked about bad weather, inevitable, unstoppable. Maya had dismissed them as tall tales. Now the nightmare was on her doorstep. Headlights flashed in her mirrors. A biker swerved dangerously close, slamming a heavy boot into the side of her car. The impact jolted her off balance, her tires screeching as she fought to keep control. Before she could react further, another rider cut her off, forcing her onto a dirt pull-off by the side of the road. Gravel spat under her wheels. Her heart hammered as she braked hard. The Reapers encircled her car like wolves, engines growling low and menacing. The leader, Brick Malloy, a massive man with a jagged scar carving across his cheek, approached first. His sneer was illuminated in the glow of her headlights. "Evening, nurse lady," he drawled, tapping a chain against his palm. "You've been driving on the wrong road tonight." Before Maya could answer, the passenger door was ripped open. Rough hands dragged her from the car, her bag spilling onto the ground. The smell of sweat, leather, and cheap whiskey filled her senses as she struggled against them, her voice cracking in protest. They laughed. Her resistance only seemed to fuel their cruelty. They dragged her beneath a sycamore tree, its wide branches stretching like skeletal arms against the sky. One of them produced a coarse length of rope. Maya cried out as they bound her wrists to the trunk, the bark biting into her skin. A sharp backhand sent stars across her vision, and the laughter grew louder. "You tell your kind that Red Creek don't want you here. Sell your land, leave quiet, or this will be everyone's fate." They beat her mercilessly, each strike deliberate, designed not just to hurt, but to break her spirit. When at last they left her slumped against the tree, bruised and bleeding, she tasted iron in her mouth and felt the weight of despair pressing down. But Maya wasn't powerless. Through the haze of pain, she twisted her thumb against the slim band of her medical alert ring, a gift from Caleb, her husband. A small vibration confirmed the signal had been sent. The Reapers mounted their bikes and vanished into the night, their laughter fading with the engines. Alone in the darkness, tied to the sycamore, Maya whispered through swollen lips, "Please, Caleb, hurry."
Caleb Ellis was halfway through polishing his boots when the vibration buzzed against his wrist. At first, he thought it was some stray notification. Then he saw the flashing alert on his phone, the distress signal from Maya's ring. His pulse spiked instantly. There was no hesitation, no pause for thought. Years of Delta Force training took over. He grabbed his truck keys, a med kit, and his sidearm, and within seconds he was tearing down the rural highway, headlights carving through the dark. The signal pulsed like a heartbeat on his GPS, drawing him toward the lonely stretch of road outside Red Creek. He kept one hand on the wheel, the other clenched so tight around the steering column that his knuckles whitened. Images assaulted his mind. Maya, afraid, hurt, alone. He pushed the accelerator harder. When he reached the sycamore, what he saw nearly broke him. Maya hung limply against the bark, her arms tied, her face swollen and streaked with blood. The beam of his headlights illuminated her battered frame, and for a moment, rage nearly blinded him. He forced it down. First rule: secure, stabilize, survive. He jumped from the truck, knife in hand, and cutting the ropes that bound her. She collapsed into his arms, trembling but alive. "Caleb?" she whispered, her voice rasping. "The Reapers, they said—" "You're safe now," I cut in, gently lowering her to the ground. "I've got you. Just hold on." The crunch of tires on gravel snapped his head around. A trio of Reapers had circled back, maybe to gloat, maybe to finish the job. Whatever their reason, they'd made a fatal mistake. Caleb laid Maya carefully against the base of the tree, then rose to meet them. They sneered, dismounting. "Look what we found," one jeered, brandishing a bat. "Hero husband." Caleb's training switched on like a switchblade. The first lunged. Caleb sidestepped, seized his wrist, and drove an elbow into his jaw, dropping him instantly. The second swung the bat, but Caleb ducked, delivered a punishing kick to his knee, and followed with a chokehold until the man collapsed unconscious. The third froze for half a second too long, just long enough for Caleb to disarm him with brutal efficiency, wrenching the chain from his grip and knocking him cold with one strike. It was over in less than a minute. Caleb crouched, catching his breath, adrenaline pumping. That's when he noticed something gleaming on one biker's hand, a ring. He pulled it off and stared. It wasn't jewelry. It was official. A sheriff's auxiliary ring. His stomach dropped. This wasn't just a gang. They were connected to the law. Before he could even process the discovery, red and blue lights slashed through the trees. Sheriff Wade Baylor's cruiser rolled up, followed by two deputies. Relief flickered across Maya's tattered face, but Caleb's instincts screamed danger. Baylor stepped out, broad-shouldered, his voice smooth as oil. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Caleb straightened. "These men attacked my wife. I caught them in the act, and I might want to explain why one of them is wearing this." The sheriff's expression didn't falter. Instead, he gave a slow, mocking clap. "That's cute, soldier boy, real cute. But here's how I see it. 3 good old boys beaten bloody, and 1 unstable veteran holding the smoking gun." Before Caleb could argue, the deputies closed in, wrenching his arms behind him. Maya cried out, "No, he saved me!" But Baylor ignored her. "Arrest him for assault. Evidence goes with us." He kicked the ring from Caleb's hand into the dirt. The Reapers, barely conscious, were helped to their feet, not only freed, but clapped on the back like old friends. Caleb's fury burned hot, but helpless. As the cuffs bit into his wrists, Caleb locked eyes with Maya. Her face was a mixture of terror and defiance. He gave the smallest nod, silent reassurance. This wasn't over. In Red Creek, justice was rigged, and now they both knew it.
Caleb spent the night in a concrete cell that smelled of mildew and old fear. Sheriff Baylor had paraded him through the station in handcuffs, smirking as he signed the paperwork for assault on local citizens. The Reapers walked free, grinning like hyenas, their bruises and split lips trophies they would wear with pride. By morning, the local paper carried a headline that made Caleb's blood boil. "Unstable veteran assaults 3 men in drunken rage." The smear campaign was already in motion. Baylor's network of allies had wasted no time painting him as the villain. But outside those walls, Maya wasn't idle. Despite her injuries, she moved with purpose. Her ribs ached with every breath, her arms bruised where the rope had cut into her skin, but her fury kept her upright. She knew the truth, and she would not let the town bury it. Help came first from Deacon Elijah Hart, an elderly church leader with a quiet strength. He had been driving home the night of the ambush, and by sheer providence, his dash cam had captured everything. The bikers circling Maya, dragging her from the car, tying her to the tree. He came to Maya the next morning, his eyes filled with sorrow and conviction. "I saw what they did, child," Elijah said, placing the memory card in her hand. "They can lie to the papers, but truth leaves its own trail. God put me on that road for a reason." Next came Ana Ruiz, an investigative journalist who had built her career digging into corruption in small-town America. She had been tracking rumors about Red Creek for months, the whispered stories of intimidation, the mysterious fires, the families who sold their homes under duress. When she heard about Caleb's arrest, she reached out to Maya immediately. "They'll try to bury this," Ana said, her voice sharp with determination. "But I've seen systems like this crumble when the right light shined on them. You have the human story, and I can dig for the paper trail." The final piece of the puzzle was Sergeant Tommy Neal, a state trooper stationed just outside Red Creek's jurisdiction. He was younger than Baylor, but seasoned enough to recognize corruption when he saw it. Neal had heard the radio chatter about Caleb's arrest, and something hadn't sat right. When he quietly visited Maya, he made his stance clear. "Baylor's dirty, been dirty for years, but proving it, that takes evidence and courage. You've got one, I've got the other. You in?" Together, this unlikely team began piecing the puzzle together. The dash cam footage, the journalist's records, Neal's testimony, and Maya's first-hand account revealed a chilling truth. This wasn't random violence. The Reapers weren't just thugs. They were deputized enforcers, sanctioned by Baylor himself under the Sheriff's Auxiliary Program. And their violence wasn't just fueled by hate, it was directed by money. Ana uncovered the name at the heart of it all: Richard Klein, a wealthy developer with grand plans to turn Red Creek into an industrial corridor. To build it, he needed land owned largely by black families who had lived there for generations, families who refused to sell. That's where the Reapers came in. Terrorize them, burn them out, drive them away. Then Klein bought the land cheap, with Baylor providing cover. Maya stared at the evidence spread across Ana's dining table: financial records, maps, names, dates. Her hands trembled with both fear and fury. "They tried to kill me because I was in the way," she whispered, "but now we know why." Caleb, finally released on bail, stood behind her, his jaw set like iron. He looked at each of their allies in turn. They picked the wrong family, and they damn sure picked the wrong fight. The conspiracy was no longer rumor. It was real, and now it had enemies. The days that followed were a blur of movement and whispered meetings. The small alliance, Maya, Caleb, Elijah, Ana, and Sergeant Neal, worked quietly but relentlessly. For the first time, people in Red Creek began to feel like they weren't alone. Families who had stayed silent out of fear now showed up at church gatherings, slipping folded notes into Elijah's hand with dates, names, and stories of frets. Veterans from Caleb's support group offered to teach neighbors how to defend themselves, not with weapons, but with awareness, teamwork, and courage. The town had lived under the shadow of fear for too long. Now, sparks of defiance lit up like fireflies in the night. Maya became the voice of the movement. Bruised but unbroken, she spoke at community circles, urging families not to give up their homes. "This is our town too," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her ribs. Caleb, meanwhile, took the role of protector. In an old barn on the outskirts of town, he ran drills with a growing group of volunteers. They practiced simple self-defense techniques, communication signals, and evacuation strategies. The people who once cowered now moved with quiet confidence, bonded by their shared resolve. Ana's articles began to circulate beyond Red Creek, published online under pseudonyms. Her reporting painted a damning picture: a sheriff's department tied to a violent gang, a developer buying up land through terror, and a pattern of families mysteriously disappearing from deeds. The pressure was building, but pressure has a way of provoking retaliation.
The first strike came at night. Flames tore through Elijah's church, devouring the wooden beams and stained glass windows in a fury. By the time fire trucks arrived, the sanctuary was gone. Only the bell tower remained, a blackened skeleton against the stars. The dashcam footage, their most powerful piece of evidence, had been hidden inside. Elijah barely escaped with his life, coughing from smoke, carried out by neighbors who found him unconscious near the altar. His injuries were severe: broken ribs, burns along his arms, smoke damage to his lungs. He was hospitalized, leaving the movement without one of its strongest pillars. The second strike was more public. At a peaceful protest on the courthouse steps, families gathered with handmade signs: "Justice for Red Creek. End the terror." Children held candles, veterans stood with folded arms, and Maya led them in prayer. The atmosphere was solemn, not hostile. Then Sheriff Baylor arrived. His deputies fanned out, rifles slung at their shoulders, faces hard. He waited until the cameras from local news turned toward him, then strode forward with a warrant in hand. "Caleb Ellis," he announced, his voice booming, "you are under arrest for arson and domestic terrorism in connection to the destruction of the Red Creek Church." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maya pushed forward, shouting, "That's a lie!" But her voice was drowned out as deputies swarmed Caleb, pinning his arms behind his back. The sight of him in cuffs again, dragged before the cameras, sent a chill through the protesters. The message was clear: resist, and you'll be crushed. Baylor's smirk was smug, triumphant. He had turned the town's symbol of resistance into a public example. Fear returned like a suffocating blanket, and the people began to disperse, heads bowed. As the cruiser pulled away with Caleb inside, Maya stood trembling in the street, fists clenched, tears cutting lines down her soot-stained cheeks. They had organized, they had fought back, and still the system struck harder. The movement wasn't broken yet, but it was bleeding. The cell was cold, but Caleb didn't feel it. He sat on the narrow cot, hands clasped, replaying the fire in his mind. He knew Baylor had set him up. Arson, terrorism, all designed to turn the town against him. Yet deep down, the arrest felt different this time. Baylor looked too smug, too sure. Something bigger was in play. That's when the door clanged open, and in swaggered Brick Malloy, leader of the Reapers. His leather vest smelled of gasoline and smoke. He leaned against the bars, grinning, his teeth yellow in the dim light. "You thought you were smart, soldier boy, but you and your little nurse wife don't stand a chance. Tonight it's over. Baylor and Klein are cleaning house. All that evidence, videos, papers, whatever your little friends think they got, it's going up in flames at midnight. Quarry's the graveyard. After that, nothing left but ashes, and you'll rot in here." Brick laughed and spat on the floor before swaggering out. But the biker had made a mistake. He'd bragged too much, and Caleb knew Maya would never stop fighting. Hours later, Sergeant Neal appeared at the jail with a stack of papers. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with urgency. "Technicality in the warrant, Ellis walks." The deputies grumbled, but Neal's badge carried weight outside Baylor's pocket. Within minutes, Caleb was free. Outside, Maya was waiting. Her face was pale, exhaustion etched into her features, but her eyes blazed with fire. She pressed a flash drive into his hand. "Nadia Klein, the developer's daughter. She came to me tonight. She's been watching her father destroy families, and she's sick of it. These files, bank records, property transfers, they prove everything." Caleb closed his fist around the drive. A single piece of truth could pierce through 1,000 lies. The clock was ticking. Midnight loomed. The quarry would be their only chance to stop the purge of evidence. Word spread faster than they imagined. By the time Caleb and Maya reached the barn where the community had gathered, dozens were already waiting. Veterans, church members, neighbors who had lost land, families who had been too scared to speak until now. They came with pickup trucks, cameras, flashlights, and most of all, resolve. Caleb climbed onto the bed of a truck, raising his voice above the murmurs. They think we're weak. They think we'll run. But tonight we stand together. Not with guns, not with fear, but with truth. We'll go to that quarry and we'll record everything they try to bury. They can't silence us all. Cheers rose, shaky but growing louder. People were tired of being prey. The convoy formed, trucks rumbling, headlights blazing like a column of defiance moving through the night. Maya sat beside Caleb, her hand tight in his. Behind them, children clutched phones, veterans exchanged nods, and Anna prepped her camera. The people of Red Creek were no longer hiding. And at the quarry, under the cover of darkness, the showdown awaited. The quarry sat like a wound in the earth. Jagged cliffs circling a deep pit, pools of stagnant water shimmering in the moonlight. Trucks idled along the rim, their headlights casting long shadows across stacks of boxes and barrels. Men in leather vests and sheriff auxiliary badges tossed files, computers, and crates of documents toward a burning oil drum. At the center stood Sheriff Baylor, arms crossed, his face lit orange by the flames. Beside him, developer Richard Klein barked orders, his expensive suit wildly out of place in the dirt and smoke. Brick Malloy and his reapers prowled like wolves, laughing as they fed the fire. "This is it," Klein shouted. "By dawn, nothing ties us to any of it." But the night didn't belong to them anymore. Headlights flooded the quarry entrance as the convoy descended like a rolling wave. Dozens of trucks, cars, and vans spread out, boxing the gang in. Doors slammed, people poured out, neighbors, veterans, mothers with phones raised high, kids live-streaming to social media. The quiet town of Red Creek had arrived armed not with rifles, but with cameras. The reapers froze. Baylor's smug expression faltered. Phones glittered in the dark like 1,000 watchful eyes. Caleb stepped forward, Maya at his side, Anna recording every second. His voice carried, steady and sharp. Everyone's watching now. No more shadows, no more lies. Klein blustered, his face red. "You think anyone cares what these nobodies film? This is trespassing, and you all—" "Shut it, Rich," Baylor muttered, but it was too late. The crowd booed, their voices growing louder, echoing off the quarry walls. Brick Malloy sneered and stepped forward, chains rattling in his fist. "You want a show? You got one." He swung at Caleb with a roar, sparking chaos. But Caleb had been waiting. He dodged the strike, driving a fist into Brick's gut before flipping him hard onto the gravel. The biker leader staggered up, enraged, and the two men clashed in a brutal fight. Caleb moved with precision, every strike controlled, every block honed from years of training. Brick fought with raw fury, swinging heavy and wild. Cameras captured every punch, every blow, the fight broadcast live across feeds. Finally, Caleb caught Brick's arm mid-swing, twisted, and dropped him with a decisive chokehold. Brick collapsed, gasping in the dirt, beaten and humiliated. The Reapers shifted uneasily, their leader broken before their eyes. Meanwhile, Maya and Anna pushed forward, thrusting Nadia Klein's flash drive into the hands of Sergeant Neal, who raised it high. Financial records, property theft, auxiliary corruption, all of it. And now, he pointed toward the fire, caught in the act of destroying evidence. Baylor cursed and reached for his weapon, but the crowd surged forward, phones aimed like arrows. "Do it," someone shouted. "Draw on us. Show the world what you are." The sheriff's hand trembled. He glanced at Klein, at the Reapers, at the dozens of unflinching faces. For the first time, the power shifted. Then came the sound no one expected. Sirens, not local, but federal. Black SUVs crested the quarry rim, FBI agents in windbreakers fanning out, weapons leveled. "Drop everything," a voice boomed. "Hands where we can see them." Baylor's last thread of arrogance snapped. He raised his hands slowly, face pale under the flashing lights. Klein followed, sputtering protests drowned out by shouts.
Deputies disarmed, reapers dropped their chains, and the fire crackled behind them like the dying breath of their scheme. The cameras never stopped rolling. And in the center of the chaos, Caleb stood tall, Maya beside him, the town of Red Creek finally witnessing justice with their own eyes. The trials were long, grueling, and public. For once, though, the people of Red Creek weren't shut out of the courtroom. They filled the benches day after day, watching as Sheriff Wade Baylor, Richard Klein, and Brick Malloy faced federal prosecutors. Anna's footage, Elijah's recovered dashcam copy from cloud storage, and Nadia Klein's financial records formed an airtight case. The defense tried every trick, painting Caleb as violent, dismissing the townsfolk as unreliable, even claiming the fires and beatings were staged. But the weight of the evidence crushed them. Testimony after testimony revealed the breadth of the conspiracy. Deputies sworn in under Baylor's auxiliary program, moonlighting as reapers. Families forced out of homes at gunpoint, Klein laundering money through shell companies. When the verdicts came, the courtroom erupted. Baylor, guilty on racketeering, civil rights violations, obstruction of justice. Klein, guilty on fraud, conspiracy, and multiple counts of intimidation. The gavel struck, and for the first time in decades, Red Creek felt like it could breathe. Change followed quickly. The state disbanded sheriff's auxiliary programs altogether. A restitution fund was created, seeded by the seizure of Klein's assets, to compensate families who had been displaced or terrorized. The church began rebuilding, this time with volunteer labor from across the county. And those scars remained, physical, emotional, and spiritual. They were no longer hidden. Elijah, though frail after his injuries, smiled when he visited the hospital chapel rebuilt with community hands. "The devil thought he burned us down," he rasped, "but fire only clears the field for stronger roots." Caleb and Maya found themselves at the heart of the rebuilding. They weren't seeking recognition, but the town saw them as a symbol of resistance. Caleb started weekly self-defense classes at the community center, teaching young people and seniors alike. Maya organized support groups for veterans and families, weaving together a community that had once been divided by fear. And then came the ceremony. Months after the showdown at the quarry, neighbors gathered beneath the sycamore tree, the same tree where Maya had been tied and left to die. But it didn't stand as a monument to fear anymore. The county had cleared the land, landscaped it, and planted a circle of benches beneath its branches. A bronze plaque at the base read, "Freedom Grove Memorial Park, in honor of those who stood against fear and for those who found strength in unity." Children played in the grass, elders wept softly, veterans saluted. And in the center, Maya and Caleb stood hand in hand. Maya touched the bark with her fingertips, her scars hidden but not forgotten. She turned to the crowd, her voice carrying through the quiet grove. "This tree once meant pain. Now it means victory. It means we belong. No one can take that from us again." Applause rose, not wild, but steady, like the heartbeat of a town reborn. Caleb slipped his arm around her shoulders, gazing at the families who had once been strangers, but now stood together. The reapers had wanted to carve fear into the bones of Red Creek. Instead, they had carved out something stronger: solidarity. The night settled warm and calm, and for the first time in years, Red Creek felt whole. The story of terror had ended. In its place, the people had planted something lasting: a grove of freedom.